Money doesn't make you powerful. It reveals how easily you can be controlled. Every raise, every purchase, every financial goal you chase tells a story, not of freedom, but of what owns you. Most people believe they're climbing toward independence, when in reality, they're just becoming more dependent on status, on approval, on systems they don't control. This video breaks down how power really works through money, not just how to earn it, but how to use it to build leverage, protect your position, and influence others without speaking a word. Drawing from the strategic mindset of Machiavelli, we'll explore 12 timeless principles that expose the truth about money in today's world, how it's used, how it shapes behavior, and how the truly powerful stay in control while everyone else chases. If you want to stop being manipulated by the system and start designing one of your own, this is where it begins. Rule 1: Money is not power, it only reveals it. You've seen it play out 1,000 times. Someone gets a raise, a woman inherits wealth, a startup closes a massive round, and suddenly they act louder, flashier, more arrogant, convinced that money itself has elevated them. But if you watch closely, you'll notice something else: the powerful don't change. Only the weak do. Because money doesn't create character, it magnifies it. It brings to the surface what was already buried inside. The coward hides behind his new status. The manipulator becomes generous only when there's something to gain. The fool buys what he imagines intelligence looks like. That's why Machiavelli's first lesson is this: don't chase money to feel powerful, build power, discipline, strategy, and reputation first, and let money become the signal of your control, not the source of it. Otherwise, you'll end up rich and still be weak. And there's nothing more pitiful than a man who owns wealth but commands no respect, a man with property but no presence. Machiavelli watched kings fall, not because they were poor, but because they mistook their gold for fear and their fortune for authority. Real power isn't when people obey you because of your status, it's when they shift their behavior before you even speak, simply because of your mind. Rule 2: Wealth without mystery is vulnerability. In today's culture of overexposure and constant validation, people confuse flexing with strength. They flaunt watches, cars, designer clothes, and financial transparency as if showing their net worth equals showing their worth. But Machiavelli would see this not as power, but as carelessness, because once people know what you have, they start thinking about how to take it. He understood a simple truth that most never grasp: power is protected through the art of concealment. The moment your money speaks louder than your mind, you've made yourself a target. If wealth becomes your identity, you've already lost. You've shown the world exactly where to aim. So the Machiavellian builds quietly. He accumulates without spectacle. He lets his enemies believe he is slightly less than he is. Because the most dangerous man is not the one who brags, but the one whose power can't be measured. Let people underestimate your finances. Let them think you're just getting by. It's better to appear modest while you're quietly positioning yourself to control the entire board. That's how you stay invisible. That's how you strike without warning. That's how real kings are built, in silence. Rule 3: Never depend on money you don't control. This is the trap that destroys most people. They think that earning money means owning power, but if your money can be frozen, taxed away, restructured, or erased by someone else's decision, then you don't own wealth at all, you're just borrowing it. And Machiavelli feared that kind of dependence far more than poverty. Because the moment your livelihood depends on a system you don't control, you become manageable. The second someone else's approval determines your survival, you're no longer a sovereign individual, you're a well-dressed captive. So ask yourself honestly, is your income built on your own infrastructure, or on someone else's platform? Could your lifestyle collapse with a single phone call? Are you truly financially strong, or just temporarily comfortable? Because if the answer is no, then you're not free. You're decorated. You can be well-fed and still be owned. Because the one who controls your access, controls you. And as long as someone else feeds the lion, the lion obeys. A Machiavellian mind doesn't just chase wealth, it fortifies it. He builds financial systems that operate in the background, quiet, untraceable, and untouchable. Multiple streams, hidden assets, income that doesn't rely on trends, followers, or public approval. Money that keeps flowing, even in silence. He doesn't need to impress or perform, because when people rely on you financially, words become irrelevant. You don't have to demand obedience, they'll offer it willingly. They'll tiptoe around your silence, apologize for things you never mentioned, and call it compromise while slowly submitting to your gravity. That's not fame. That's not fear. That's control through economic weight. When your financial presence pulls harder than theirs, people begin to orbit you without being told. That's what Machiavelli would call true wealth, not riches, not luxury, but silent leverage that grows stronger the less you show it. And if you don't learn to create that kind of independence, you'll spend your life generating value for others, trapped in a system where someone else decides your ceiling. So don't just build income. Build autonomy. Not the kind you post. The kind no one knows exists until they try to control you, and fail. When you have that, you don't need to act powerful. You'll feel it in every no you say without guilt, in every time you walk away without hesitation, in the quiet confidence that you owe no one anything. That's not luck. That's structure. That's the type of wealth the world doesn't see, so they call it fortune while you just call it preparation. If you want to understand the nature of money, forget budgeting and saving. Forget how to flex it or multiply it. Machiavelli would tell you to study how money shapes behavior, because money isn't just fuel. It's a pressure point. A tool that influences choices, reveals loyalties, and exposes what people try to hide. When you stop thinking of it as a reward and start seeing it as a system of pressure and persuasion, the entire meaning of wealth changes. Which leads to the next law. Rule 4, money unmasks loyalty faster than anything else. People swear their loyalty when everything's calm. They say they're with you no matter what. But bring money into the equation, real power, real opportunity, and suddenly their true priorities surface. Money doesn't need to shout. It forces choices. Give someone influence over your income, and you'll learn how conditional their support really is. Offer a bribe, and see how quickly their ethics bend. Or make more money than them, and watch their admiration turn to discomfort, suspicion, or quiet resentment. Machiavelli didn't trust those who only stood by him when he had nothing. He paid attention to how they reacted when he had more control, more leverage, more visibility. Did they celebrate it? Or did they start questioning whether he deserved it? Because wealth doesn't change people, it strips away their mask. And that's why the Machiavellian never flaunts what he has. He uses money like a mirror to test character without warning. He might offer someone an opportunity, a taste of power, not to reward them, but to see what rises to the surface. If they become entitled, he steps back. If they become needy, he goes silent. If they get greedy, they're gone. That's the purpose of wealth when used strategically. It's not just for building empires, but for filtering the people allowed inside them. Because some people are only loyal when they're struggling. The moment they're warm, they forget who lit the fire in the first place. Your job isn't to hide your wealth, it's to observe how people change when they think you have it. Their reactions become blueprints of their true character. Watch closely, because few things expose someone faster than proximity to power. Rule 5, the weak admire money. The strong control access to it. There are two kinds of people, those who chase wealth, and those who understand that others will chase them for it, and use that dynamic to rule. The weak obsess over getting rich. The strong focus on building systems that make others reliant on them just to survive. Machiavelli never worshipped gold. He studied the effect it had on people. He saw something most still miss: the one who distributes the money shapes the behavior of everyone who wants it. That's why kings had courtiers. Why lords had vassals. Why modern billionaires don't argue, they allocate. If you want real power, stop scrambling for income like a desperate man. Start building value like an architect. Ask yourself, how do I create something people depend on? How do I turn skill into leverage? How do I become the source, not the seeker? Because the one who writes the checks doesn't chase. The one who owns the table never begs for a seat. And once you decide where the money flows, you don't need to manipulate people, they'll do it themselves to stay in your orbit. That's the game, not earning more, not working harder, but becoming the gravitational center. The more rare your access, the more valuable it feels. Machiavelli didn't believe in generosity for applause. He believed in calculated giving, distributing resources as a form of psychological design, not sentiment. You give not to be thanked, but to observe. Who grows entitled? Who proves loyal? Who mistakes access for permanence? That's how you separate allies from opportunists, those who pretend to serve while waiting for the next reward. Rule 6. Let them believe money is the prize. This is how you win without conflict. Let others chase the job title, the bonus, the inheritance, the trophy. While they run, you watch. You study the landscape. You remain still while they exhaust themselves. You build silent leverage. You focus on timing, positioning, and precision, not applause. Because the Machiavellian knows, money is bait. The real prize is control. Let them celebrate their raise. You own the company that issues it. Let them fight over fractions. You own the formula. Let them build reputations over decades. You build psychological dependence, something that keeps them serving you long after the transaction ends. Because money disappears. But a debt of value, social, emotional, strategic, lasts for years. The truly strategic don't get rich to be admired. They get rich to walk away from things others crawl toward. To say no without trembling. To move in silence while others chase visibility. Machiavelli wouldn't waste time showing off. He would sit quietly, observe who tenses at the mention of money, and silently calculate, who's useful? Who's a threat? Who's predictable? That's power, not through noise, but through insight. Not by owning the gold, but by understanding how gold reveals people's weaknesses. Once you understand this, you stop playing the game and start engineering it. You don't just make money, you master the machine that moves it. To those who don't understand the nature of money, it looks like everything. But to those who do, it's just a lever, one that only works because people believe the illusion behind it. And that illusion isn't wealth. It's security. Money doesn't truly promise power. It promises protection. From chaos, from failure, from being ordinary. Machiavelli understood, the most loyal people aren't the ones you pay the most. They're the ones who fear what life would look like without you. Rule 7. Use money to create comfort, then control the fear of losing it. Because people don't work harder for more. They work harder to avoid losing what they already have. That fear is stronger than greed. And fear, when used with precision, becomes obedience in disguise. Once someone becomes accustomed to a certain income, lifestyle, or level of recognition, they begin to attach their identity to it. Their sense of self fuses with what their wealth grants them: comfort, access, attention. Give someone just enough status, just enough visibility, and then quietly let them feel it slipping away. You won't need to demand obedience. They'll offer it. They'll overcommit. They'll self-edit. They'll obey rules you never had to speak aloud. Not because they fear you, because they fear losing the version of themselves they became through you. This isn't cruelty. It's design. A recognition that economic anxiety shapes human behavior more than logic ever could. And Machiavelli wouldn't use that understanding to exploit, he'd use it to position. He wouldn't issue threats. That's far too obvious. He'd delay a response, withhold praise, let their name fade from the conversation. He wouldn't cause panic, just enough uncertainty to make them wonder, did I lose my place? And in that subtle discomfort, people reveal how tightly their dignity is tied to their comfort. Because here's the Machiavellian truth, most people will do anything to avoid going backward. Not because they're greedy, because they've confused their self-worth with their standard of living. So the real game isn't giving people money. It's giving them an identity that requires money to maintain. Then simply observe how far they'll go to protect it. That's how empires were kept intact, not by blood, but by salaries, rituals, and tokens of status that could vanish at any moment. Give people something they feel they've earned, then remind them how easily it can disappear, and you never have to raise your voice again. Now, we step into darker waters. Rule 8, the rich are not admired, they're assessed. One of the great lies sold to the modern world is that money earns you respect. That the more you display your status, the more seriously people will take you. But Machiavelli knew better. When you enter a room flaunting wealth, you don't impress people. You invite calculations. They'll measure what you spent, what you wasted, what your taste lacks, what it would take to replace you. Wealth only draws admiration from those beneath you, those who want what you have. The powerful? They're not impressed. They're analyzing your movements. So when you start operating from insecurity, when your goal becomes looking rich instead of thinking strategically, you attract predators. People who smile at your success while quietly tracking your vulnerabilities. People who will weaponize your need for validation. That's why Machiavelli would say, never show the world how much you need to be admired. They'll use it to chain you. So how does the Machiavellian display wealth? He doesn't. He shows discipline, not dollars. Precision, not purchases. Influence, not indulgence. He may own everything, but he never needs to prove it. And that silence gives him his edge. Because when no one can see the full extent of your empire, no one knows where to attack. The quiet rich man is dangerous, not because of what he has, but because he doesn't need your praise. And he certainly doesn't fear your judgment. Which leads us to the most psychologically dominant principle of all. Rule 9, become untouchable by detaching from it. This is where the dynamic shifts entirely. Most people live in constant fear of losing money, because losing it would mean losing themselves. But the Machiavellian cultivates something rare, non-attachment. He earns. He invests. He leverages. But he never lets money become his identity. And that creates the most powerful message you can send in business, in war, in relationships, in life. I can walk away. And you can't. That single truth flips the entire equation. Because the one who can walk away, without fear, without hesitation, is the one who holds all the power. People don't chase you because you're rich, they chase you because you're free. You're not dependent on the deal, not addicted to visibility, not trying to prove you belong in the room, because deep down, you know that even if everything collapsed tomorrow, you would rebuild it, not from luck, not from begging, but from the same internal design that made you formidable in the first place: discipline, clarity, leverage, and patience. That's how money actually works, not as a mystery or a miracle, but as a machine. And those who rise aren't the ones who treat it emotionally, but the ones who treat it like a strategist, calm, intentional, detached, immune to flattery and invisible to manipulation. That's when the shift happens, not when you earn a fortune, but when you become the force that decides who else does. At that point, money is no longer the destination, it becomes what it was always meant to be, an extension of your thinking, a tool shaped by your mind, not a mirror of your insecurity or a symbol of your worth. To master money in the Machiavellian sense, you must stop treating it as a trophy or a finish line, because money isn't an achievement, it's a weapon, and like any weapon, its value lies not in the fact that you hold it, but in how precisely you can wield it. Rule 10. He who controls the flow controls the frame. Machiavelli never trusted appearances. He understood that real power doesn't belong to the man who holds the treasure, but to the one who decides where the treasure moves, who receives it, and when. In today's world, that means you can have wealth and still be irrelevant, you can be rich and still be replaceable, but if you control the distribution of value, attention and influence will begin to shape themselves around you, not out of affection, not out of admiration, but out of necessity. This is the essence of strategic positioning. You don't need to be the wealthiest in the room, you need to be the one who allocates the resources, sets the terms, defines the agenda, or controls the spotlight. Machiavelli understood that when you become the source of opportunity, you no longer need to force anything, your silence becomes suggestion, your hesitation becomes pressure, and your absence becomes a form of punishment. Kings didn't maintain dominance by hoarding gold, they maintained it by building systems of dependence that made others fragile in comparison. Because people don't follow wealth, they follow the place it comes from, and that source must always remain distant, controlled, and deliberately unclear. You don't give unlimited access. You don't explain your methods. You let them guess, speculate, and worry, because uncertainty breeds loyalty in ways clarity never could. They won't risk offending you, not because you're feared, but because they're unsure of how to replace what you offer. And that's not just financial power, it's behavioral control. Rule 11. Never teach them the system, let them depend on the outcome. In a world obsessed with content, tutorials, and blueprints, everyone wants to appear generous by sharing how they did it, but the Machiavellian thinks differently. He understands that once people understand the full structure of your system, they will eventually find ways to recreate it without you, and once they no longer need you, they stop respecting you. So instead of teaching the process, you let people benefit from the results without ever revealing the architecture behind them. You give just enough to earn trust, just enough to spark belief, but never enough to be imitated. You offer clarity without replication, insight without instruction, value without transparency. This is how power was preserved in old dynasties, not just through wealth, but through legacy and selective access. The elites didn't publish playbooks, they raised heirs and protected bloodlines. They taught their own, but never empowered outsiders to reach their level. Because the less people understand your rise, the more mythical your success becomes, and once that myth takes hold, it becomes more valuable than money itself. It turns into psychological capital, an aura of certainty others will follow, not because they fully grasp it, but because it works, and in a world ruled by appearances and insecurity, effectiveness is often more powerful than explanation. And once people begin to trust your results more than they trust their own instincts, you've quietly rewritten the script they follow, not just financially, but psychologically. That's when you stop being a source of money and start becoming a source of meaning. And once someone sees you that way, they no longer try to compete, they only try to remain close. That's what makes you irreplaceable. Rule 12. Build a life where money is present, but never loud. This is what separates those who are merely rich from those who are truly powerful. The rich discuss money. The powerful don't need to. They move in spaces where wealth is assumed, not announced. They're surrounded by people who understand value on an instinctive level, measured not by numbers, but by positioning, timing, silence, and leverage. They no longer chase. They've reached equilibrium. Money has become what it was always meant to be, a silent instrument, not a performance. A foundation, not an identity. It's always there, but never desperate for attention. You don't want to be the one constantly speaking about income, assets, negotiations, or deals. You want to be the one who listens quietly, says little, signs the check, and leaves the room before others realize the conversation has already ended. You move without urgency because you hold more than you show. You control more than you explain. You influence more than you'll ever need to prove. That's how money works in the modern world, not through noise or status games, but through architecture, patience, and quiet control. True power doesn't flash, it frames. It isn't announced, it's felt. In today's reality, wealth isn't measured by what you show, but by what you've made others depend on, without ever revealing the full design. Machiavelli never lived in an age of digital finance or global markets, but he understood something timeless, that the one who shapes outcomes silently will always outrank the one who begs for recognition. But money is just one form of influence. What comes next isn't about income, assets, or leverage, it's about the unseen forces, how people perceive you, how they interpret your silence, how they follow your lead without realizing it. Because in the end, it's not wealth that rules people, it's belief. And the sharpest leaders don't just control resources. They control the narrative. And soon, we'll talk about how.